Welcome to On This Day on the Gruely Truth Sports Network. I am your host for On This Day, Mike Goodpastor. Today we're going to talk about January the 22nd, 1989. The San Francisco 49ers defeat the Cincinnati Bengals in Super Bowl 23. Hate saying that every time. 20-16. Now, this is normally we do this from the perspective of the winner. It's going to be a little bit both here, but mainly from a Cincinnati Bengals angle because this was a time and a team that could have made the Cincinnati Bengals relevant as a franchise. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the Bengals and 49ers from Super Bowl 16 up to this fateful game. And the outcome of Super Bowl 23 and the legacy of the Cincinnati Bengals, I think, were both forever altered on a play that their cornerback did not make. Lewis Billups in the fourth quarter of that game dropped an interception. And I've interviewed most of the guys that played on this Bengals team. And as Solomon Wilcott said, there was a sense of dread when you watched Lewis Billups drop that interception. That was the one you knew because Joe Montana wasn't going to give you another shot. It just takes your momentum, it robs you of your energy, and you've got to regain your focus to overcome it. All of those things take place. There was a sense of dread like, oh, we're going to live to regret this. Now, Billups' dropped pick in the fourth quarter of the Cincinnati-San Francisco Super Bowl rematch prevented an almost sure victory for the Bengals. And to understand the import of the play, it's both vital to look at the play itself and the history between these two clubs, as well as how each club is viewed today. And of course, the 49ers are going back to their umpteenth Super Bowl, and the Bengals have won one playoff game since this fateful day, January the 22nd, 1989. Now, the Bengals and 49ers first met in the Super Bowl 7 years prior at Super Bowl 16. It was the first opportunity the then legendless San Francisco franchise had at hoisting the Lombardi Trophy. And it was a chance for a still relatively young Cincinnati organization, which at the time was only, I think, in its 14th year of existence. And the Bengals had made the Super Bowl, like I said, in just their 14th year. They've made the playoffs in 1970 in just their third year. That was unheard of back in the day because in the late 60s, expansion teams weren't giving the talent in the draft or anywhere else to be able to be successful. And a lot of NFL owners were afraid that if they gave Paul Brown anything, then he would build another dynasty in Cincinnati. Now, in the 1970s, the Bengals had some really good teams. Won the division in 70. 73, they lost to the Dolphins, the eventual world champs. 1975, they lost a close 31-28 playoff game to the Oakland Raiders. Now, the thing about the 1975 team is one of the greatest coaching staffs in NFL history. Your head coach was Hall of Famer Paul Brown. Your offensive coordinator was Bill Walsh. Now, at the end of the 1975 season, Paul Brown decided to step down as the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals. And it would seem to most people that the logical choice to replace him would have been the bright, innovative young coach, Bill Walsh, who brought the West Coast offense, which was really the Ohio offense at the time, in 1970. And it came as a fact where Greg Cook got hurt. You couldn't run the normal passing offense of the day. They had Virgil Carter, backup Sam Weiss, who recently passed away, and who would be the head coach in this Super Bowl 23 Bengals team. And Virgil Carter didn't have a lot of arm strength. So that's where you got the West Coast offense. And they actually made the playoffs after starting the year 1-6 in 1970, won their last 7 games, including a win over the Boston Patriots. I think it was like 45-7 to clinch the playoff spot. They lost to Johnny Unitas and a great Baltimore Colts team, 17-0. But Paul Brown, in his infinite wisdom, decided that he was going to go with the older Bill Tiger Johnson, who was a great football coach in his own right, but not really a great head coach. And in 1976, Bill Walsh had left because he was done with it. He was mad because he wasn't the head coach. And Tiger Johnson at 76 looked like a good hire until the end of the season. This was a Bengals team that went 10-4. They had 2 shots to make the playoffs. Shot number 1 was in a snowstorm in Cincinnati in 1976 against the Terry Bradshaw-less Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike Kruzek was the starting quarterback. The game was nice weather through the first half. During the second half, you had a blizzard. 6 to 8 inches of snow in that second half. One of the most memorable snow games you'll ever see. And the Bengals had a 3-0 lead. Booby Clark, former Bengals running back, fumbles the ball. The Pittsburgh Steelers end up scoring towards the end of the game to win 7-3. The Bengals get another chance on Monday Night Football the next week to make the playoffs. All they have to do is beat the Oakland Raiders. And a lot of people thought that the Oakland Raiders would lay down so they wouldn't have to deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers in the playoffs, because this would have kept Pittsburgh out if the Bengals win. But the Raiders were a very proud team, and there's no way that they were going to allow this to happen. And they end up beating the Bengals 35-20 on Monday Night Football. 1977, the Bengals finally beat the Steelers in a game like that. They score a long touchdown pass to Isaac Curtis to beat the Steelers in a frigid day at Riverfront Stadium. The next week, all they have to do is beat the upstart Houston Astros in the Astrodome. The Bengals blew it. They lose the game 21-17, and then 78-79 come, and it's a mess. In 1980, they hire Forrest Gregg after firing Bill Tiger Johnson, replacing him with Homer Rice, firing Homer Rice. Forrest Gregg came in and gave this team kind of a new mindset, a new attitude. And the same thing was being done at the same time in San Francisco, where Bill Walsh comes in. First couple of years, they were terrible. 1980, Bengals and Niners were both last-place teams. Like they were 6-10, 4-12, and nobody really expected anything. In 1981, the critical move by Bill Walsh there was making Joe Montana the starting quarterback. The Bengals, they have Ken Anderson, who in the first game of the season, down 21-0 to the Seattle Seahawks, gets benched. Excuse me, getting over a cold. And third-string quarterback Turk Schonert comes in, leads them to 27 points. They win the game. And then the biggest move here was Forrest Gregg, instead of going with Turk Schonert in Week 2 in New York, decided to bring back Kenny Anderson. And Anderson had a great day in New York. They beat a very good Jets team that would make the playoffs that year, 34-33, I believe it was, in New York. Bengals go to the Super Bowl. 49ers go to the Super Bowl. Nobody expected this. And the playoffs were great because in 1981, you had the Bengals beat the Chargers in the coldest game in NFL history, 27-10. And I know that everybody says, well, the reason the Bengals won, they weren't a better team, but the weather was bad, the Chargers couldn't handle it. It's not true. You look in the middle of November in 80-degree weather, the Bengals beat them even worse in San Diego, 41-17. The San Francisco 49ers win on the catch by Dwight Clark, 28-27 in San Francisco. So these two teams enter their first Super Bowl ever, and the first half was an absolute disaster for the Bengals. They trailed 20-0 at halftime, multiple turnovers, and they come out, they score to make it 20-7, and then they get first and goal from the 1. And Pete Johnson gets jacked up to the line, second and goal from the 1. Third and goal from the 1, the Bengals didn't go to the 260-pound fullback. They decided to throw a pass. Charles Alexander caught the pass, but he cut his route too short. Got tackled by Dan Buns, a foot short of pay dirt. On fourth and goal, the Bengals went to their bread and butter again, with Johnson taking it short at the goal line. Hacksaw Reynolds and the rest of the 49ers stop him. The Bengals lose 26-21. Now, the Bengals kind of dropped off after that. In 1982, they went ahead and they were the number 2 seed in the strike-shortened season with 7-2 record. Freeman McNeil, Richard Todd, the New York Jets came in and upset the Bengals 44-17. The 49ers didn't even make the playoffs in 1982. But 1983, the Niners make it to the NFC Championship game. And in 1984, the Niners have one of the great teams in NFL history. They go 15-1. They beat the Miami Dolphins 38-16 in the Super Bowl. And now, by the time you get to Super Bowl 23, Bill Walsh had taken the 49ers to 7 playoff appearances in 10 years. Now, both of these trophies, 16 and 23, could have been sitting in Paul Brown's office. And I think every Bengal fan knows that. Brown was not only the founder of the team, but as the first head coach of the franchise, he still passed on Bill Walsh. And that, to this day, is something that has to be one of the biggest what-ifs in all of football. Now, those Cincinnati, this is the thing. When we go to Super Bowl 23, This is not like this was an ill-fated game entering the fourth quarter of Super Bowl 23. Now, despite losing their best defensive players, or one of their best defensive players, Tim Crumry, he gets hurt on the first series. Head coach Sam Weich's group had more than held its own. The Bengals were up 13-6. The defense have kept arguably the NFL's greatest quarterback in check and kind of foiling what was to be Bill Walsh's swan song. Montana and that West Coast offense, 6 points through three quarters. It looked at that point it was to be Cincinnati's night after Stanford Jennings with the kick return to make it 13-6. Now trailing 13-6, but in the Bengals red zone, Montana looked for the quick strike to tie up the contest. On 2nd and 10, John Taylor ran a deep slant from the right side of the formation. As Taylor got into his route, Billups undercut him, attaining inside position, forcing Montana to make an almost perfect throw. He did. That is, Billups had been the one running. If Billups had been the one running the slant and wearing a 49er uniform, Montana's 7-step drop resembled more of a graceful backslide, except for the part where the future Hall of Fame quarterback threw off his back foot. Now, this was almost a certain interception, and the spiraling football landed softly in Billups' hands. He dropped the ball. As soon as it arrived in Billups' hands, it bounced out, taking the hopes of an entire organization and city along with it. On 3rd down, Montana hit his throw right on Jerry Rice's numbers for a 14-yard touchdown. Game's tied. After Jim Breach hit a field goal to put Cincinnati back up, Montana took over with 3:20 to play and 90 yards to go. 11 plays later, we all saw Taylor beat Billups to win the game, a pitch and catch captured by NFL films and relived every year to Bengals fans' chagrin when they showed the great moments of Super Bowls past. It's the thing that's amazing here is when you watch this game is the fact that you don't have that no-huddle offense that the Bengals were so known for, attempted to run at any point during the game. And the Bengals were a great running team. And they didn't really run. In the first half, they ran the ball pretty successfully. Ickey Woods ran for 72 yards. Him and James Brooks on the year had combined for 2,000 yards. They were up 7 in the fourth quarter with the NFL's top-ranked rushing offense and couldn't really do anything. Boomer Esiason was ineffective, I think, for the game. He was like 11 for 26 for 100 and some yards. The game was Cincinnati's to lose, and they did just that. I mean, this is a football team in the 88 Bengals who basically were the first team to really revolutionize zone blocking in the offensive scheme, the first team to go no huddle for an entire game at some points. They were the first defense with Dick LeBeau to bring in zone blitz. So this is a football team that still to this day has an effect on the NFL. But the credit goes to Bill Walsh. And if Billups intercepts this pass, and the sad thing is, Louis Billups passed away in a car wreck 5 years later. But to this day, we would see that interception. It would be up there with old man Willie Brown from Super Bowl 11. It just wasn't to be. Now, the 1988 Bengals, they were special to the city of Cincinnati. And I would say that even if Joe Burrow shows up in Cincinnati and wins a Super Bowl, for older folks like myself, nothing will ever top the Ickey Shuffle, the SWAT team, the Who Dey rap, and the things that happened in 1988. They were special to the city. They were special to every player that played in this city on that team. I've interviewed a bunch of them. I've never interviewed a guy from the 1988 Bengals that after I talked to him, I didn't think more of him than what I thought before we talked. They're all great guys. They were led by Sam Weich, who is a man that recently passed away. If you go to grillingtruth.com, you can see my interviews in the past with him. Absolutely great man. He was an innovative coach and an even better human being. So hopefully someday the Cincinnati Bengals will win something. But as a Bengals fan, at least I could say I've seen my team in 2 Super Bowls. Cleveland Browns fans have never seen them even in 1. So I figured I'd have to get something in there that would validate my team. But Super Bowl 23, I think up to that point was the greatest Super Bowl ever played. I still think it's probably top five because if you watch that game, the hitting in that game, Ronnie Lott, David Fulcher, um, Bill Romanowski with the huge interception. Uh, the other thing is, coaching wise, the thing that was the killer to me was the Bengals had a 3rd and 7 with a little around 3 minutes left, and they ran the ball instead of trying to get the first down. I think that a lot of times you got to play to win the game, not play to lose it. My other question of this is always, why is it Reggie Williams, one of the great linebackers in NFL history, why is he not even on the field in that last drive? Why would you play prevent defense against Joe Montana? Doesn't make any sense. There was a lot of errors here. You had Stanley Wilson in the cocaine-induced stupor the night before the game, Tim Crumrye's injury, the trouble with the Bengals no-huddle offense, and Don Shula, a sitting coach, some reason on the committee with his buddies coaching against Sam Weiss, and they're trying to limit that offense. But overall, I wouldn't trade the 1988 season for anything. Someday the Bengals will win a Super Bowl, and things like this will make it that much more special. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I want to remind everybody you can hear On This Day every day on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. So for now, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.